All right, welcome everybody. I'm Ivana Manthor Anderson. So excited to having us today with social studies and the ELD standard course of study, looking at multilingual student success in the social studies classroom. This is part one of a two-part webinar series with actually a third part that we'll tell you about later in the presentation. It's not wanting to behave, huh? So while Michelle is working with our technology, we thought we'd worked out all our glitches. Okay, so someone's having an issue with sound on their end. Someone else says they can hear me. So that's good to know. I'm not sure why our slides aren't advancing. Stacy, I know you're online and maybe you can help us figure out what's going on real quick.
Can you just share that link to that slide deck in Teams with me, and I'll go ahead and present just because I don't want us to lose any more time.
All right, I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so I've got the recording started again. So again, my name is Ivana Manthor Anderson. I am one of 4 multilingual learner Title III consultants at the Department of Public Instruction, and I am so excited today to get to collaborate with Michelle.
Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Mclaughlin. I am one of the 4 social studies consultants, and I am sorry about the echo. I promise you I'm going to try my best to figure it out, but I am excited to be here. We've been planning for a while, and we're just excited to be able to talk about these new standards.
Great, so the slide is on the wrong. Okay, so we want to see who is in the room with us today. So if you would type in the chat box, which of these buckets do you fall into? Are you teacher support? And maybe able to see who it is. That's like things like curriculum coaches and instructional coaches and literacy coaches. Or are you in administration? Maybe you're a principal, assistant principal. We've got our classroom teachers. If you're a classroom teacher, is it social studies? Is it ESL? Is it some other language? What about our district support and our schools of education? Do we have any IHEs in the house today? So I am seeing a lot of different answers. It looks like we have a variety of people, classroom teachers, both social studies, and also some ESL, and that's exactly what we're hoping to see. We've got some district literacy support. Fantastic. What else do we have? Let's see. So a variety, some teacher support. Awesome. I'm not seeing any IHEs today, but a great cross section of different people with different roles that we'll be able to talk about and look at as we are walking through the standard course of study for ELD today and how it impacts and supports social studies. Awesome. So our session goals, we have 3 parts today. The first one is to acquire working knowledge of the newly approved North Carolina ELD standard course of study for social studies. And as we're doing that, we want to become familiar with the resource hub. We have a standards resource hub that includes a lot of classroom ideas for supporting your multilingual learners within your social studies classes. And then the very third goal for us, the last part, is to prepare for part 2, which is next Tuesday on October 11th. So we look forward to having you guys back and bring some of your friends for October 11th. And we really do want to see our ESL partners along with our social studies partners so that we're speaking the same language and are able to communicate and share. I know some of you, especially my ESL teachers, you're begging for the presentation, but know that that will be presented to you at the end. All right, Michelle.
So the need for this presentation, why this professional development session? And so let's think about it in terms of 3 different groups of people. First, we've got our multilingual students, our content teachers, and our State Board of Education. So with that, we look at the multilingual learner and the fact that most of us know that a large portion of our classes are becoming filled with students who their first language is not English. And so that's one of our fastest growing populations. And as they are in our classrooms learning, they are spending most of their time in the mainstream. Their whole time is spent trying to connect language with content. And so with the content teacher, knowing that the students in their classrooms sometimes are multilingual learners, we often are trying to look and see what we can do to help them, but many of us haven't had any experience in a teacher education program with having taken class to help us. And then we haven't had a lot, if any, PD that would help us be able to make better decisions that help those students. With those being two groups that are immediately impacted, our State Board of Education approved the standards, the ELD, science, and in ELA that complement and that serve the best interest of the multilingual student. And so with that comes a mandate that training and conversation. Social studies teachers better help them be able to help students access language. So with that, we like to make sure that there's an alignment that you want to make sure that you take advantage of when it comes to your teaching standards, because this is a part of your growth and your continued development in quality teaching.
So Michelle, I'm having a really hard time hearing you, and so is Stacy. I'm not sure about others. You're going in and out. Sometimes we hear you really clearly, and then you're kind of gone.
All right, I apologize for that. I'll let you take over talking to Vanna so that there isn't any problem with that, and I'll try to troubleshoot.
Yeah, we got to have your voice. Your voice is the most important one on this webinar. As I tell you, we have been troubleshooting all day. So thank you for your patience as we continue to troubleshoot. So I had also lost connection and I'm on my hotspot. So we'll see how that goes. So the alignment with the NC professional teaching standards, we always think it's important to connect our work with the teaching standards as you are thinking about what you're doing in your classroom and how you can have artifacts and ways to show, to demonstrate your great work. So when we're working with our multilingual learners, different aspects of that work can tie into different standards. And so we were highlighting here, when you're establishing a respectful environment for your diverse population, as you are paying attention to the ELD standards and looking at the ways that you can look at the assets that your multilingual learners bring that ties directly into standard 2. The same as knowing your content, but also being able to teach that content and scaffold it for the students where English is not their first language. And you can go through each of these and look at different specific examples. So we just wanted to bring this to the forefront at the beginning so that you could think, as you're going through this training, how might this play into any of these teacher standards and what artifacts might you want to take away from this training and put into your practices so that you can show your administrators and show in your own work to just improve what you're already doing. How about that? Michelle, is it coming back for you?
I don't know. Is that better?
Let's give it a try.
All right. So in the real world classrooms, we go back to those three groups, and now those three groups are multilingual learners. They're trying to access their language and they communicate, while at the same time, they're trying to learn social studies. They're trying to understand and engage in the social studies skill building. And then the content teacher, you want to always make sure that you are planning instruction for all students, but particularly when you have the ML student in your classroom, you want to make sure you're addressing them. So with those being two considerations, what we often see is as content teachers, we aren't sure if we're really doing the right thing, if we're really helping the ML student. And so when you look at that, and we know they're trying to learn and we're trying to help, what kinds of things are we doing? What are we asking them to do in the classroom? So with that, we want you to take a minute to look at some of the options of what we may or may not be doing. So we want you to either use your phone or your tablet, and you can use the QR code, or we're going to have Ivana or Stacy drop the link to the activity into the chat in a few seconds, and you can use that link.
Okay, I'm not seeing, there we go.
Okay. And I will click onto this in a few minutes, give everybody a chance to actually start putting in some of their thoughts.
Okay, Michelle, somebody said you're logged in twice, and that's why we're probably getting the feedback.
Okay.
I was trying to find that as well to see if I could mute one of you.
Okay. Let me see.
So while she's playing with that, trying to figure out where that came in, as you're answering the Mentimeter, there's a long list for you to check off. So which kinds of these things are you asking your students to do as they engage in their learning? And this is all your students, not just your multilingual learners. So as you are working through that list, we'll give you just another minute.
Okay. I think that's better. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, that is what it must have been, because I gave the other Michelle the boot.
You're still fading out a little bit sometimes. I'm not sure where your mic is, but.
Okay.
So do we want to go ahead and show the results or go to the other slide?
Yes, let's go to the results. If you could put that link to the results in the chat box, that will help, because I don't think this is the right link here.
Okay, you want the results link in the chat?
Sure. It should be beneath the regular.
There we go. That should be it.
And everyone can really look at that. And what you should be seeing is that as you started going down the list, there were about 14 or 15 items. And as you went down the list, you should have seen pretty much you wanted to check everything. I don't know if you did, but if you did, then you would be absolutely on point. And then if you go back and you see one that you didn't check, you say, okay, yeah, I thought I should have checked that. Because what we see is that all of these things, every last single one of these things, are things that we do in our classrooms when we're teaching social studies. So, you know, we're making claims, we're asking students to make claims, compare points of view, evaluate information, classify information, analyze cause and effect, all of those things. All those things are considered social studies skills for us, and they transfer into being very good practices that help the multilingual learner access language and be able to communicate while they're learning social studies. So you'll see all of these things as we begin to explore these new ELD standards. So the answer is all of these, and hopefully this will begin to tie in for you a little greater as we get ready to move into actually looking at those standards.
So what I hear you saying, Michelle, is when we're talking about the ELD standards, we're really not talking about something different. We're talking about what teachers are already doing in the social studies classroom, and we're looking at ways to support them in working with their multilingual learners.
You're talking exactly about the things we're already doing being best strategies to be able to connect with the multilingual learner, and these new standards will show us exactly how they complement what we're already doing.
Awesome. And as you changed your presenter, I've lost your video. So I don't know if you're able to turn that back on, or if you'd like to, we'd love to see your face as well. I'm seeing some comments in the chat box about extensive high order analytical thinking and supporting their stance with point of view with evidence, and that these cross over nicely to ELA as well. Oh, nice. Thank you. Yes. So as we are looking at the 5 ELD standards, if you're familiar with the ELD standards already, you know that they look a little different than the standards you may be used to seeing. And so we're going to talk a little bit about our standard statements, but then we're going to move into some of the enhancements in the ELD standards that look more like the standards that you're used to. So I believe if we click, we have ELD standard number 5, which is the language for social studies. So allowing our multilingual learners to communicate their information, ideas, and concepts. So you are working with the social studies content. The ELD standard 5 is there to help you specifically look at the language that the students need in order to access that content and have equitable access to the content. We also want to take a quick look at ELD standard number 1, which I believe we'll highlight with the next click. Yes, ELD standard number 1, and you see the note at the bottom that goes with the star, that ELD standard number 1 can stand on its own. It's our social and instructional language, and that's often where we used to stay with our multilingual learners, just how to communicate, how to go to the bathroom, how to navigate your day. But that social and instructional language goes throughout everything we do, giving instructions in the classroom on how to do the work that you're being asked of. There's so many different ways that social and instructional language blends in through all of the other standards. And thank you to the person who had mentioned how it works nicely with ELA as well. You can see our other standards for language arts, mathematics, and science working with that language. So as we go a little bit deeper, we want to tell you about some of the exciting resources that we've been able to provide. So we have an entire hub for the ELD standards. So on the left, you see the tiles from our hub in our Canvas platform. But today we're really going to focus on the ELD standards based resources, because what we have done there is we have added a section specifically for social studies, collaboration, and resources. We're going to dig into some of those other pieces, but we know that it's kind of hard when you have to dig through a lot of places. And so Michelle has done amazing work. I told her I think she knows the standards better than I do at this point, digging into the standards, digging into the courses, and creating for us some documents pulled from what we had already created to make them social studies specific. And so the ELD social studies collaboration resources are going to be there specifically for you in that particular link. So we will go out to that in, are you able to go out to that, Michelle?
I am.
Awesome. Thank you for driving. I know it's hard. We went back and forth on how to drive.
So. All right. And so when you are in this, and you'll have this link, you'll see right now, you've got 3 folders here. If you just want to quick and dirty hit right into your social studies, whatever your grade band is, you can come here. You don't have to sift through the other content areas, and you can go straight into getting any document you want for your standards K-12 or your unpacking for those same standards K-12 and how they accompany the actual social studies standards. And then we've got some support infographic information for you also. And so you'll be able to navigate directly to that. We've got an activity a little later where you'll be able to actually click on to that link and actually begin to bookmark that for yourself. All right.
Thank you. So on the next slide, you see that everything we're doing is talking about integration of the content and the language. And I love this graphic that the academic content is being used as the context for the language learning, while the language is the means to learn the academic content. So when we're working with the ELD Standard Course of Study for Social Studies, we can move into all sorts of different ways to do this. We have an unpacking document that's going to help you make those connections to the content and the language integration, actually make that explicit and specific for you. We're also going to look at the key language uses and the language expectations, which are part of the ways that we break out those standards and make them more concrete. All right, so looking at the anatomy of our standards, remember that I said when you first look at what are called the standard statements from WIDA, they're kind of amorphous, a little vague. It's like the language for social studies, but what do I do with that? So when we are looking at our standards, we now have what's called a language expectation. And that's the example at the top of your screen. The language expectation has a number of parts. The part of the dark blue at the top is the standard statement. And that standard statement here is the language of social studies, as we pointed out above. And then we have a number of different opportunities to look at very specific items within to break out that standard statement. So if you look, we have our content area, the ELD for social studies. We have our grade level or grade band. If you look at the second, I'm trying to point on my screen and I'm not projecting. The grade or the grade band, which in this case is kindergarten. And then we have our key language use of inform and our mode of communication, which is interpretive. And we're going to talk about those a little bit more. But each of those help us break down how the language can be used within your content. And then within this particular one, it says interpret informational text in social studies by determining topic association with a compelling or supporting question. So again, those are things you're already doing in social studies. But as we're working with the ELD standards, we're going to be looking at how do you use the language to support the students in doing that. And one of the things that we found is that these language supports and these strategies not only help your multilingual learners, but they help all of your students. So when we go to the bottom of the screen, we have a little bit more information about the structure of each of the standard course of studies. So we talked about standard 1 a little bit before about the social and instructional language. And we're also talking about standard 5, which is the social studies, working with the language for social studies. So you can see below, I think if we go ahead and click, that we have narrate, inform, explain, and argue. And these are the 4 key language uses. Now, these 4 key language uses are present in all of the different content standards, standard 2, 3, 4, and 5. But when you're working with social studies, you're able to look at how narrate, inform, explain, and argue function with the language within your content area. And if we'll click, so within the narrate, there we go. We have the opportunity to either inform or to explain. And so with inform and explain, sorry, we have interpretive and expressive. And one more click, and the interpretive and expressive are our part of our language expectations here. We're looking at how do we communicate. Are we looking at listening, reading, and viewing, which is a very important piece that was added in our newest edition of the standards. When we're interpreting, we're not just listening and reading, we're also viewing. And then for expressive, it's speaking and writing, but it is also looking at different types of representation, multimodalities for being able for us to share information, and multimodalities for students to share with us what they have learned. Whew, that's a lot of information, so I'm checking the chat box to see if there are thoughts or questions. I think as we keep going, you'll have a better understanding of what we are talking about, because I'm going to turn it over to Michelle so she can talk social studies.
So we've just gone through and we talked about the key language uses. With that, once again, they are here for you, and there are only 4. And the same 4 are going to, if you're talking to your colleagues in science or in ELA or in mathematics, they're going to have the same 4 language uses. But as you look at those, you begin to see these are things that are very familiar to you. And as you begin to look at them, we want you to take about a minute, and we're going to ask you to look through each of these and see what the descriptions inform you should be considered and should be going on. So give you about a minute. I'm going to put the timer on. And I'll just use my timer since this one isn't counting down. I'll use mine.
It's
So
counting
give
down
you-
on my screen. I can see it.
Okay, well, good. Then it will notify me when it's done.
Perfect. And I know some people might be having trouble reading the screen, so I put each of these in the chat box in case you're having trouble reading it on the screen. We have 12 seconds. All right, it bounced 0 on my screen.
Okay, great. So we just wanted to give you a chance to take a few minutes just to read through them and not rush to the next slide. And as you look through them, a lot of what you're reading, if not all of it, is very familiar because these are things that we include in our planning and instruction when we're doing our lessons. And so we want to make sure that as we begin to become familiar with these, that we see as many commonalities and things we're familiar with that make us comfortable and know that we're on the right track. But as you look at, for instance, inform, you're seeing things such as describe, compare, contrast, organize, categorize, classify concepts or ideas or phenomena. And that is a great deal of what comes out in our objectives as well as in the tasks and assignments that we ask students to do to help them process their learning, as well as with explain and the same thing with argue. All of these things are familiar to you, and you probably remember that you checked them off when you did the Mentimeter activity. So as you look at those, again, one of the questions that you begin to see and we want you to think about is to really think in terms of where do you actually see some of these key uses being implemented? And when you think about them in terms of the social studies standards and the lesson plans or in your classroom practice, some of the things that might come to mind might look like this. And that is, you can see in your standards, these things in your inquiry stream, in all of our objectives, in our assignments, our activities, and in our direct instruction where we come up with our activities and our assignments and we use them for guided or independent practice. And so when you think of that, hopefully you're beginning to see the familiarity with what you're doing is something that when you begin to connect with the ELD standards, it's not going to be foreign to you and it's not going to be another add-on. This is not something you're adding on. This is just enhancing what you do. And now you're getting to look at some particular objectives that will help you be more deliberate in making sure that you're addressing the needs of the multilingual learner. All right. So with that, we will move on in the session and kind of get an opportunity to have you look a little bit closer at the actual standards.
So it was really interesting when we started on this collaboration and Michelle started looking at the standards. She got so excited. She's like, inquiry, inquiry, the course we're going to tell you about later and all the things we're doing, it's all about inquiry. We already do that. That's what we do. And we need to help our multilingual learners do it. We need to help all of our learners do it better. So it was very exciting to hear a content partner get so excited about the ELD standards, because as she said, often people are like, oh no, one more thing. And we know that we're all responsible for the state standards, and the ELD standards are state standards as well. But we really want to help you see that this is here to help you. We're here to help you support your multilingual learners in all of your classes, but especially in your social studies. So Michelle was just talking about key language uses: narrate, inform, explain, and argue. And we're going to look quickly at each grade level to see which of these key language uses are most prominent. So we'll talk about maybe why as well, but let's take a look at kindergarten. So in kindergarten, when we're talking about key language uses, remember we're looking at that middle portion of the standard, ELD, SSK, dot, inform. So inform is our key language use. So in kindergarten, which key language uses do we see? In these two examples, we only see inform. So let's see what happens when we go to our next grade band, or our next grade, which is first grade. So type in the chat box, what do you see here? In kindergarten, we saw inform. Which of the key language uses do we see in first grade? Scroll down, make sure I'm seeing people right. There we go. Inform and argue. Yes, we see argue, inform, and argue. So we've moved from just inform in kindergarten to inform and argue in first grade. Any ideas why that might be? You can type in the chat box as well. Why might we move from just inform in kindergarten to inform and argue as our predominant key language uses in first grade? Keep thinking about it. There we go. A progression of thought. Absolutely. Developing students' critical thinking as their point of view is happening. Good. Inform and argue because they're learning to support their ideas. Absolutely. So we are progressing linguistically. We're progressing as the student is age appropriately, as they're maturing. How about what happens in second and third grade? Our next grade band is a band of second and third grade. So let's see what happens there. What do you see happening in second and third grade? All right, I saw someone say inform, argue, and explain. So I am going to ask you to look at that. Do you see inform actually listed in second and third grade? So we know that they have learned how to do some of that. So someone else said we don't have inform. So we're going to look when we get to the next slide. We're going to talk a little bit more about how all of these things exist in all of our grade levels, but we're looking at the most predominant and really working on how to expand on those. So in second and third grade, we've moved to explain and argue. All right, how about the next grade band? And I'm going to pick up the pace just a little bit. Here we still have explain and argue. What about 6 through 8? Can we go to 6 through 8?
Yeah.
Which again, we have explain and argue, and 9 through 12. What do you think we're going to have? So yes, people are typing inform isn't there. And 9 through 12.
We have that.
There we go. I was just slow on my end. I'm sorry. And again, explain and argue. So of these 4 key language uses, narrate, inform, explain, and argue, which key language use is not represented in the K through 12 progression for social studies? Which one did you not see? Okay, we saw inform in kindergarten and first grade, but narrate we did not see at all showing up in these charts. If you go to the next slide, again, we want to point out that it is not because it doesn't exist. It's because it is not the most prominent. So on the left side, I have the list of key language use distributions for grade 1 And then the key language use distributions for grade 2 through 3 on the right. And I've circled on the bottom that when you see a darkened circle, it is the most prominent key language uses. And so those charts you were looking at were actually expanding on those most prominent key language uses and helping us see ways, not all the ways, but many of the ways that they can be used. When you see sort of a half moon, it's prominent, but the empty ones don't mean it's not there. It just means they're present. They are not the most prominent. So if you'll click one more time for me, in first grade, we saw, for social studies, in first grade, we see that the most prominent are inform and argue. Those are the circles that are darkened in. If you look at that chart, you see standard 1, all of them are darkened in, whereas standard 2, which is language arts, 3 mathematics, and 4 science, each of the different content areas have different predominant key language uses. But in kindergarten, which one key language use is predominant for everybody? Can you tell? I know it might be a little small. Inform, right. So in kindergarten, developmentally appropriate, there's a lot of inform going on. It doesn't mean the other things aren't there. It doesn't mean they're not happening. It doesn't mean the students can't do them. It just means they're not the most predominant. And if you click one more time for me, when we get to second and third grade, we saw that in social studies, our most predominant were explain and argue. Narrate would come in and inform would come in, but they are not the most predominant. So again, even though they're not there, they exist. But we want to help you as educators realize that if you want to focus on the language for your multilingual learners, these are the places where you're going to get the most bang for your buck because they're the most predominant of the key language uses. All right, I'm looking for any questions and we can keep going. Thank you guys for participating. I appreciate that. So we mentioned the Standards Hub before. And when we go into the Standards Hub and you look at these little tiles, there is a tile for unpacking and a tile for mapping. And these two pieces of the hub were very exciting projects for us because our educators that were developing these pieces for us worked with our content area partners at DPI to develop materials that we believe will be very helpful for you in the content areas. So on the next slide, we'll tell you a little bit more about the mapping and the unpacking. So the mapping document shows us how our language expectations, those ELD standards broken into language expectations for our multilingual students actually connect and can be integrated into the different content areas. And of course, we're specifically talking about social studies. So we'll talk more about the mapping document in our second broadcast, but the mapping document allows you to look at those ELD standards paired up in a way with your content standards to say, if you're teaching this content standard, here's some things linguistically for you to be thinking about to support your multilingual learners. The unpacking document, though, goes even deeper than that. The unpacking document, and you guys are familiar with unpacking documents in the work that you guys do already. So they support the language in social studies content and how you can bring them together with the ELD language. And so we have the opportunity to show you in the unpacking document what your students should know, what they should understand, and what they should be able to do, as well as clarifying some of those ideas and helping you develop language objectives specific to the work that you're doing within the content. So in this presentation, we're going to focus on the unpacking document.
All right. So what we've done is in trying to connect the unpacking document to practical everyday use, we thought we'd use an example. And then after explaining the example, take you into the opportunity to explore a little bit on your own with some of your colleagues and look. So it's kind of starting with this, what's on the screen. Teacher in sixth grade. So that we pull from sixth grade. And this teacher is going to begin teaching about the beginning of the Italian Renaissance. So this is probably going to be the very end of the year, and this teacher knows the students are going to be going to the 7th grade. They've done very well, very interested, and they've left this to the end because they know that the 7th grade teacher is really going to go into depth with the Renaissance simply because of the time period. So with the rise of the Italian Renaissance in the late 1300s, we're going to look at the beginning of the rebirth of the arts and science and culture. And so the 6th grade teachers pulled out about 2 or 3 different objectives. And of those, one of them is from the behavioral strand in social studies for 6th grade, which is 6B 1.1. And of course, as you see here, the teacher now really is going to focus on this for the beginning of those maybe first 2 lessons and really look at how religion, tradition, and cultural practice influence the development of civilizations and societies in Africa, Asia, and Europe. And the focus right now is really going to be in Europe, specifically in Italy. And so as this teacher goes through the focus of the lesson, this is the focus for the social studies, and having a couple of multilingual learners in the classroom, this teacher is going to go over to the unpacking document for the ELD standards and look through the 6-8 strand. So as you saw when Ivana took you through, you saw there's a particular strand for kindergarten and one for first, then 2nd and 3rd are together, 4th and 5th, and then 6 through 8. And that's where this teacher is going. And as they go through and they start looking, they know there are only 4 key language uses. But as they get down, this is the choice this teacher has made. So this teacher has pulled this out of the unpacking document. With that, they've kind of walked through there, and as they determine the skills they want to really work on with all students, they looked at this and said, perfect, bingo, because this is not only going to help all students, specifically, I'm finding out this is a great way to really help my multilingual students. And so this teacher has picked out the 6-8 explain and the expressive for the mode of how that student is going to work with that. And so we see here we've got construct social studies explanations, that, and of the several that were choices, the one this teacher has picked is that generalize multiple causes and effects of developments or events. And of course, the development and event that we're going to be working with is going to be the beginning of the Italian Renaissance. And we're going to talk about cause and effect. So as you look at this example, you can see over here on the right-hand side, we did a screenshot from the ELD standard unpacking document. And this is where this teacher pulled from. Teacher found that they wanted to deal with the explain expressive, and the first 3 weren't really going to be what the teacher wanted to work on in these first 2 lessons. That's why we highlighted this last one, and that's what ended up being a part of their lesson. And it's going to strengthen the teacher's lesson for not only the multilingual student, but for all of the students. And so you'll see you then have skills that are coming out in the unpacking document, and it will let you know what will be most helpful to the multilingual student. And in this case, you want those students to make general or broad statements about causes and effects of aggression or events, which are the Italian Renaissance. And then they've got some unpacked functions dealing with defining cause and effects and things that will help the students kind of manage both language and communicating that language. At the same time, they're still learning the social studies about the Italian Renaissance, the rise of the Renaissance. And then they looked out because even though this talks about the Cold War, this is a classroom example that most definitely this teacher can take and make it fit for the Italian Renaissance. So these are just examples, and they use content pieces that can be transferable to any piece of content. And so as you look at what your objective is in language, you'll see students begin to start generalizing about causes and effects. Well, isn't that what all you're going to want to do for all of your students? And so as you begin doing this, not for the Cold War, but for the Italian Renaissance, you begin to see that you can see the students grasping and progressing in the activities that you're giving, as well as you're looking at your ML students and you know that you are addressing their needs also. And so with that, what we want to have you do and take some time with is exploring doing some of that same type of thinking and planning for an activity. And we're going to kind of call that see, think, and build. And we are putting a spin on the see, think, wonder. But you're going to explore on your own. And we're going to put the link into the chat for you that will give you the actual activity, as well as when you get to the activity, and I'll give you a few seconds for us to get the link into the chat. But as you get to the activity, I'm going to click onto this so that you will see how you will select the group that you're in. But we have built some breakout rooms, and if we've done them correctly, and if they have if they're still there as we put them in, we've got groups, and you're going to hopefully get into a group and be able to do this activity. So Ivana,
I've got it set for 9 breakout sessions, which should be 4 to 5 people.
okay.
I'm going to create the assignment, and I think we're still good with 8 minutes. We go till 5:15, and so I think we're
Yes.
still good with 8 minutes. Perfect. All right, I'm going to create the assignments and
Okay.
start the breakout sessions and see how it goes. We ready?
Okay, give me one minute.
Okay.
I'm going to just click onto this. And as you get into your breakout room, when it comes up on the screen, you'll click onto your link for the activity, and whatever breakout room you're in, you're just going to go to that group and click onto that group, as some of you are doing now. And it should take you down to that group, and you're color coded so that you don't have to worry about being in the wrong group.
We ready?
All right, thank you, Ivana. I think everyone is ready because I see some people in it.
Awesome. I just opened the breakout rooms. They should be able to hit join. Sometimes the windows might get hidden behind another window. So if you don't see the join link, close out some windows and you should find it. I see a lot of people have gone into the room, but I see a number of people that have not joined yet. And great, timer's going. Okay.
Okay, and we will give you the time to get in and get situated. And you may see Ivana and I moving from room to room. Sit in and listen for a few.
I'm still seeing a few people on the screen. Again, if you want to check your windows, you might have a pop-up window hiding behind another window so that you can go out to your breakout rooms. We are still recording. For those of you that are watching the replay, watch the timer. We will be back in about 5 minutes.
Ivana, I think maybe we might want to give a little more time. I was looking at the Google Doc, and I think they're still probably talking and trying to maybe sift through some of
I
that.
agree. I agree. So we had one participant that wanted to go to a room, but somehow had hit wait till later. So we got her in a room just now. If there's anyone else that hasn't gone in a room, I think that's it. I think that was the last one. Okay, great. So how much longer do you want to give? We have about 2 minutes left on the clock.
Well, want to give about 5 minutes in addition to that.
Will that give us enough time to wrap up by 5:15?
I think it will. I
Okay.
can't see the rest of the but I think we are wrapping up
We have about 4 more slides.
with our Padlet, and we may just yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. So
So
there's a
if we
minute
do
left on
5
the
more
clock.
minutes, if we do 5 more minutes, that'll give us at about 5 after.
If we do 4 more minutes, that'll put us right at 5 o'clock by my clock. How about that?
Okay, that'll be perfect. That'll be perfect.
Thanks. Amy, I don't want to embarrass you by calling you out, but there's two of you. Do you want me to try to send you back into another room? I think I'll just try. So for those of you watching the broadcast, you see 7 minutes and something on the clock. We really have about 2 more minutes that we're going to leave people in the breakout rooms so that we can give people time to type into the document that they are working on that was linked. All right, I have 4:59, and I think when I hit end breakout sessions, it's going to take another minute. Michelle, are you good with me hitting end breakout sessions?
I am perfect.
Okay, I was looking for a way to send. I guess I can send an everyone message. All right, they have a 1 minute countdown.
Some people have started, some are still good. This is good because this gives us a great start for where we can begin in section 2 or in part 2. So this is going to be perfect.
That's what I was thinking too, that we can't really expect it to be completed today because they're just getting a feeling for it. So that's exciting.
And if it
she
gets
wanted
them
to pull
thinking.
documents again. All right, 17 seconds and they will be back.
Okay.
Looks like they're coming back, Michelle.
Okay. We'll give them a few seconds and then you let me know when everybody is back.
It looks like everyone should be back.
Okay, great. All right. So we are back and you are probably not finished. We're in the Google Doc with you and I've got Google one of the sections up on the screen because what we're hoping is that you got the chance to talk and really look and see what did you actually see. And you know, as we look here, we see a strong match between the language and the intent of the two standards, and that is a major thing. And so as you're beginning to see what these standards have in common and how they really do support each other for the learning of all students, you begin to kind of now, hopefully you're thinking about the benefit to the ELD student also, and you're starting to do some building. So you're going to not have to come back and worry about not finishing, because this is where we're hoping that we'll be able to pick up when we begin and start working for part 2. And as we started doing our planning for this, we were trying to roll everything into one, and then Ivana and I were like, wow, this really lends itself to a 2-part. And so as you're thinking about what you saw in the unpacking document and how it benefits you and your planning. We're going to also want to end our session today with having you think about how does it not only benefit you as the teacher planning, but how then is it going to benefit that ML student, that multilingual student, as well as every other student in your class. And so as we started this whole afternoon out, really looking at the types of things that we do in our social studies classes, and we checked all of those things, now you're beginning to see where they are. Each of those things you're going to find in the ELD standards, probably worded just like you saw them in the Mentimeter activity. And so with that, we are going to ask you to take about 2 minutes and think about some of your conversations, as well as what you were starting to put into your see and your think and your build. Think about those things. What benefit does this particular ELD standard have for me as a teacher? What benefit will it be for my ML learner? And then what benefit can it be for all students? And you're going to get that link in your chat, and we're going to give you about 2 minutes to just jot down on the Padlet. If you click your plus and put down what you think, and click your plus and put down what you think for each of the other two.
Great. So we need to be on the next slide.
Okay.
Perfect. And the link is in the chat box.
Okay.
And just as a reminder, we do go to 5:15. So we're always trying to be very aware of our time, and we should end right on time. We hope nobody has to drop off early because we have some very exciting information to share with you, not only about the agenda for next week, but also about the online e-learning course with an amazing quote from an educator that you know well named Michelle Mclaughlin. And Michelle, do we want to show the responses on the Padlet?
I thought I would give a few
Okay.
minutes to go in, and that last minute, I can tap in and put that on the screen for those people who are going to come back to theirs. I'll give it a few more seconds.
Because I think Stacy's the one you were saying earlier that you were showing some results and I wasn't seeing them. So that was why I was asking, just to make sure that we're actually seeing it. Awesome. So somebody pulled it up already. Perfect. Sorry if I got ahead of us on that. I was excited.
Yeah. Oh, you're good. You're good. You're good. And there we can see some of the comments, and then we've got about 55 seconds left. So just about a minute. Oh yeah, this is good. So we really have really tapped into our main goal, and that is really looking at not only becoming familiar with these standards, but seeing what benefits they're going to be. And it's not an add-on. Oh, I love skill building, yes. Okay. And please keep going and adding to this. Excuse me. But we've got about 20 seconds left, and then we are going to go back and kind of close out. But as you look at some of what your colleagues are tapping into, it really is an excellent resource and ideas for ESL students. But it's also, as you're seeing, good, excellent ideas for teaching all students. I like the way the benefit over here talks about boost the writing scores for the access test, as well as helpful for the ESL students to see some vocabulary across different curricula. And then, of course, all students get to hear the material in different ways, work with it in different ways, and points of view, which is a big social studies skill, is something that you're not sacrificing, but you're tapping into that for all of your students. So these are great. And so as we go back and move into finishing up, we want to kind of share with you what we'll be doing in part 2. And keep in mind, we're going to have that same Google document, and you'll be able to get back into your groups. And now that you've been in it and you've thought about it, you'll be able, this is where we'll begin to kind of work and segue into some of the other portions that we want to connect with next week. So Ivana, I'll turn it over
And
to
Michelle,
you.
people are asking about the presentation. So, well, it was one of the things Michelle and I talked about. We, on the EL side, it's probably EL people asking or ML people asking. We tend to give out the presentation at the beginning, and social studies tends to give it out at the end. So,
Yeah.
Michelle, we'll be sharing that link at the end, which we're almost at. So our part 2 agenda, lots of exciting things going on. We will revisit how easy it is to incorporate the ELD standards into your social studies instructions. We'll also be looking at, again, the connections to the teaching standards and how you might weave that into a growth plan. We'll also talk about whose responsibility is it, right? Who is working with our ELD students? How are we sharing those responsibilities? What does the content teacher do? As well as revisiting the hub and digging into the hub a little bit more with both with the mapping and the unpacking and other helpful resources. Looking at the e-learning course, which we're going to tell you about in just a second. So you have the opportunity, if you would like to get started on that, before we meet again on the 11th, and then before we have our e-learning club meetup on October 25th. So we want to make sure that we are tailoring this presentation to you. So we would ask you to respond in the chat box. For part 2, we've told you all these things we're looking at and thinking about what we've done today. What are you most interested in having time to explore or better understand next week? So that means we're counting on you all being there. But what are you most interested in having time to explore or better understand in our session next week? And while you're thinking about that, we'll go ahead and let you know that we would like you to bring your October 11th social studies plan with you, your lesson plan, or whatever you have most recently done, so that we can actually tap into what you're doing in your classroom as we're talking about these resources. So I'm seeing that people are interested in talking about the responsibilities, right? Who does what and how do we support each other? People are wanting to look at the hub and dig more deeply into the resources. Instructional delivery for social studies in first grade. So being very specific, how do I get into my content? And that's why we want you to bring your social studies lesson or recent social studies lesson. Let's see, once I can see the standards closer from the link you share, I can better answer what I want to see. Absolutely. So again, you'll have a chance to dig into these a little bit more. Resources. All right, thank you. So one of the resources we want to tell you about on the next slide, strategies to work with teams, with content teachers. Nice. On the next slide, as we are wrapping up, we want to talk about the e-learning course. So the WIDA Consortium has created an e-learning course. It does generate a certificate that you can turn in for CEUs if they're approved by your district. It is a 4-hour course. It is online. It is self-paced. Michelle has already taken the course. Her ELD partner is a little behind. I have not yet taken it. But Michelle, I'm not going to let her talk because she'll talk for an hour. She's so excited. You can see her testimonial taken from someone who tends to find most online courses to be verbose, cumbersome, and non-motivating. This course is awesome. The learning modules are exciting and meaningful. Each is full of engaging and relevant connections based on real-world scenarios. As I reflected on my teaching of ML students, I wish I knew then what going through this short course has taught me. So this course, again, is online. You can see on the slide some of the things that it covers. And you can do this at your own pace. So we encourage you to go ahead and get started on it and plan to join us on October 25th at our e-learning meetup. Now on the next slide, you will see that if you are an ESL teacher, if you are working with this testing, you already have access to the e-learning courses. If you do not already have access to the e-learning courses, you will need to send me an email and include your first and last name, your email, your title, and your district name so that I can set up an account for you so that you can jump in there and take this course. So again, it is scheduled to say it could take 4 hours. It may take you less, it may take you more, depending on how deeply you want to go into it. So it is an opportunity to really dig in to the ELD standards to understand more about the standards and how they specifically apply to social studies. I would let Michelle talk about it, but again, she got really excited and we have 2 minutes left for questions. So Michelle, of course, if you want to say something, please jump on in. But we have 2 minutes left for questions and to wrap up and to get you out on time. So thoughts,
This is
questions,
perfect.
lots of information. While we're waiting for questions, do you want to say anything, Michelle?
Looking forward to starting out next week, addressing some of the interests and curiosities that were in the chat, and they're perfect for what you've got lined up.
And I don't know what @Patricio5 means. I probably just missed something in the chat box. So
Okay, I'm going to go to the good part where everyone gets to get the PowerPoint and the evaluation.
what you've all been waiting for. So this is how you get them to stay till the end. Is that what I'm hearing? That's sneaky. That is sneaky, Michelle. Okay, I'm going to put the link in the chat box for the evaluation. And please know that certificates will be issued. Thank you for the feedback. Yeah, the See, Think, Build activity was great, and it's going to give us the opportunity to continue to build in our next webinar. I'll also put the participant copy link of the PowerPoint in here. This will be archived and will be shared both on the Social Studies website and in the ELD Hub. So thank you so much, Stacy. I don't think we even need to share the screen anymore. Thank you. You can just turn off the screen sharing and we will thank everyone. We are ending right at 5:15. I'm going to turn off the recording. And again, thank you all for being with us. We'll stay on for another minute for any other questions.